Hi, welcome to Sense 36, Domineering and Territorial Sense. So before we get started on a little chat about this, go ahead and do your journal work. And then let's talk about Sense 36, Domineering and Territorial Sense. So my reaction when I saw this particular sense was, I don't get it. What do they mean? That's not nice. Totally didn't identify with that, which I believe is a sign of how socialized women in particular are to disidentify from anything assertive/aggressive, or something that seems not nice, not keeping the peace, that kind of thing. So that was interesting. When I started to do a little bit of research into this and look at a little bit of some research studies, what I found was then clearly obvious to me. The human species, just like most other species, demonstrates domineering and territorial sense. Absolutely, we are no different. And typically this involves kind of a show of assertion/aggression, but not an actual threat. So, for instance, a moose has a territory, and if that territory is encroached upon, they may have a show of aggression, like they're going to have a battle, or some species have kind of a ritualistic battle, a pretend battle. And the risk of having an actual battle, of course, every time your territory is encroached upon, is that you might get hurt. So that's not actually what they do. It's just kind of a show of territory to say, hey, back off, and of dominance. So humans do the same thing. So I read an interesting study that was about students in a library, in a college library. And students would typically sit in the same spot if they were there all the time, and they would put their things there. They would sit down and put their things out. And then if they left for long periods of time to go in the stacks, for instance, they would expect to come back and that would still be their territory. And if that was challenged, they would get really upset and sort of hissingly whisper to whoever had encroached upon their spot, like, what's up? Back off, basically. It's the same thing as in other animal species. We are shockingly similar and also use those traits often in a different way than other species do. But in this sense, we're just like any other animal. So I thought that was very interesting. There's also a lot of information around dominance, human dominance, and that is similar to other species as well. It just is, I think, in our culture, there's certain acceptable ways to show dominance, very subtle ways, and there are unacceptable ways. So for today's activity, I just want you to notice whether or not you feel encroached upon and like you have certain territories that are yours. In our culture, for instance, we stay a certain distance apart from each other. Different cultures have different distances, but we all have it. So if someone steps into your space, notice how you feel about that. Notice if that brings anything up for you. Or if you want to do a little experiment with someone you already know that's not going to take a swing at you, step into their space and see what happens. Typically people will back off and kind of feel a little bit unsafe because we have this unspoken agreement that we keep a certain amount of space between us, for instance. So I would encourage you to do that little experiment. And also, if you have a chance to go out into wild nature, Notice how we don't have that with, for instance, a tree. Like we can just go up and hug a tree or put our hands on a tree, or think of it more as an object. And I would like to propose that perhaps, like we do when we enter a wild area, asking the permission of that area and the beings in that area for us to join, the more we start to acknowledge that these other species actually have their own needs and wants and preferences, the more we will start asking that permission. The more we will start treating everyone and everything around us with the respect that it actually deserves. So if you have a chance to go into wild nature today and walk up to a tree, just even internally, because other species don't communicate with words necessarily, they communicate with social behaviors. So just stand a few feet from the tree, whatever feels comfortable, and just sort of feel into an asking of permission. Can you touch the tree? And just see what difference that makes and what comes up for you. And then journal about it. And then do your 1 to 10. And then I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks so much.